cryptocurrency space. I'm your host, Piter, joined as always by Ozzy. How you doing today, Ozzy?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Awesome. Thank you. There's a ton to get to as always, so we're going to jump right in. Please do your own research. This is not financial advice. If you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing, commenting, maybe even a little. It means the world to us. We are sitting on a bit of a dip on Monday morning, December 11th. About a 5% dip-ish.
6 3/4 right now. Bitcoin's trading around 40,800. We have touched a low of just shy of 40,000 today. A decent pullback compared to the fact that we were almost trying to crack 45 2-3 days ago. So a pullback, but not, I would say, unexpected.
Yeah, I think the general sentiment is this is a healthy pullback and necessary. I know when I see moves like this, I rush to look for some type of news that's driving it. I don't really see anything in particular. Just feels like more of a healthy pullback. But did you notice anything in particular out there in the news world?
Not when it started. That's the interesting thing. There's been a few things that have happened since that might explain why we're seeing a pullback. But the one thing that I think we could say is this week is Fed week, interest rate decision, and CPI all coming out this week. And some people say that this could be just a correction in anticipation of that and waiting to see what that might do to the market. But I know that there's definitely some other things that could be impacting that as well.
Yeah, for me, I didn't notice anything in particular other than just, a healthy correction. But we're sitting here on December 11th. We're about 20,000 blocks away from the next halving. Blocks occur every 10 minutes. So it's currently estimated for April 17th. We have, like you mentioned, we have our Fed meeting this week, but I think it's 3 meetings from now. So there's the February meeting, there's May. Oh, no, there's not one in February, right?
There's January 31st.
Yes, at the end of January, then there's not one till March, and then there's one early May. And by May, which is, about a half a month after the potential halving, current sentiment is 75% chance that there's a rate cut. And then we also have the ETF narrative. There's still a healthy, positive sentiment right now. A lot of high expectations that's been kind of pumping this up, and maybe a drawback was necessary. But we do have quite a few updates on this ETF narrative.
That's for sure. The ETF narrative is still going very strong. Discussions between Bitcoin ETF issuers and the SEC have advanced to very key details. We've got 13 applications right now for ETFs for Bitcoin, and they're looking at very key and technical details. So this is really not something that we've seen with previous iterations of ETF applications, and so it means that we're getting closer and closer to reality. With ARCs being the first in line with a January 10th deadline, please note that there is a 5th through the 10th window that's currently open. And so we're definitely watching that. And the SEC hasn't necessarily said that they're going to approve any of the ETFs, but there's definitely some interest going on. The main sticking point is whether the ETF issuers will create a cash or an in-kind settlement mechanism. So basically whether they settle in Bitcoin or settle in cash. This is apparently the big sticking point right now. And as we've said in previous shows, if the SEC wants to buy more time, they could ask ARC to withdraw their application and refile so that they have until March. This could be legally risky, but is definitely still a possibility.
Yeah, so I guess it's legally risky because of the grayscale decision. So the SEC kind of got pushed back on with this grayscale decision. It gives them less room to maneuver. But this is a Reuters article, and they're saying Yes, the analysis are exciting and these discussions are positive, but there is still an out for them. So it's just important to remember there's a lot of bullishness around this ETF narrative, but it takes one ARC withdrawal and refile and we're pushed back to March. So that would be a very interesting outcome. But there's still a lot of sentiment going around this January 10th date. So to kind of continue on with that, there's kind of a couple of really interesting stories around that. This was to do with Google. So beginning January 29th, 2024, advertisers offering cryptocurrency coin trust targeting the United States may advertise those products and services when they meet the following requirements and it's certified by Google, that they are financial products that allow investors to trade in shares holding large pools of digital currencies. The TLDR, it's allowing advertising for ETFs in time for these launches that are going to come out. So it was just interesting that Google updated their policies to kind of allow for a potential revenue stream, basically.
Yeah, they're looking to capitalize on that market, and I think it's also recognizing some of the legitimacy that's coming to Bitcoin and Bitcoin products. I think they know that these ETFs will be coming, and so they're going to get a lot of complaints from the issuers if they aren't allowed to advertise it. I mean, Grayscale's been advertising in airports for a while now, and so I'm surprised and good to see that Google's getting kind of on track.
Yeah, this is just one of the kind of trying to read between the lines that gets people excited that it's happening. It's happening. But the other one was the SEC on their website put out educational material on quote unquote crypto asset securities. Bloomberg's Eric Balchuna, who reports a lot on these ETFs, said they did the same thing right before the Bitcoin futures ETF. So there's kind of another speculative excitement that, this is happening.
They're at least preparing for it, and I do think this sticky issue of whether they can settle in Bitcoin or not is super interesting, and I think for Bitcoin maxis, they'd love to see it settled in Bitcoin, but I do wonder if it will be forced to settle in cash just to allow it to pass, which will be interesting.
In terms of what they have to do to get it passed, we have a bunch of updates. It's another one of the exciting things is seeing the SEC negotiate and then all these companies come back with updated applications. So we have BlackRock, Bitwise, and Fidelity. VanEck that resubmitted amended filings. So BlackRock updated document including language about the efforts of the trust administrator to monitor unusual price movements. It also anti-money laundering compliance language and included a verified PricewaterhouseCoopers statement. Bitwise also updated its application. The updates are seen as a step that allows the company to tailor applications to the regulations requirements so that they're continuing to jump through whatever hoop they put in front of them to get this done. And just a positive sign for Bitcoin ETF getting approved.
Oh, yeah. It's highly possible. And just the fact that they keep making small amendments to the language is generally meaning that they're very close to agreement and that the ETFs aren't going to be rejected because otherwise they wouldn't be asking them to make these amendments. I think one big thing that has also come out in the last week is that Hashdex, which is one of the 13 companies that have applied for a spot Bitcoin ETF, thinks that the ETFs will start trading in Q2 2024. So this is pretty interesting. That would kind of follow more of a March timeline because March is the start of Q2. But just because something's approved in January, or approved in March, it does take a couple months usually for it to start trading, or at least a month before it starts trading. So that's something to watch. It doesn't necessarily rule out either date, right? Plays right in the middle. But they also expect it to be quickly followed by an ETH spot ETF. It seems like they're generally pretty hopeful on both ETFs and think that they'll fall in quick succession, even though we have seen the first delays on the original ETH ETF application. So they've still got some ways to go.
It's also a reminder there could be some volatility after an approval because there won't be launches and it could take weeks or months and no one seems to be 100% sure how long it's going to take. It was kind of an intriguing aspect of this story as well, is that there is going to be this gray area after an approval and before launch.
Yeah, so it could very easily be a sell the news event. We'll definitely have to watch and see what happens, and I'm definitely watching very closely at everything that's going on in this market.
The last couple of little bits was that Fidelity, another huge, the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation website, they have a ticker for their ETF under FBTC, and then kind of a more fun one, Van Eck has one called HODL, HODL.
Yeah,
So
there's
that was
definitely
some of the last little tidbits.
It's pretty interesting. Interesting names. It's super, super cool to see all of this going on. That being said, we've also got El Salvador that's launching their $1 million Bitcoin Citizenship program. So El Salvador is partnering with Tether to unveil a new visa program, which requires people to pay either $1 million in Bitcoin or investment. So very interesting, especially because there's more affordable citizen options. The EU and Antigua, Dominica, and
Caribbean
St.
countries
Lucia.
in general, yeah, they're around 100,000. I had no idea there was a market for this type of thing. It's just, I mean, El Salvador, okay, interesting. People with Bitcoin want to go to the hotspot country for it. Makes sense. I mean, they're asking a ton for it. I don't think they're going after masses. They want a few big investors, people that are going to be adding to their whole Bitcoin economy, not just a bunch of people that have a little bit of Bitcoin. But it was fascinating to me that there is a whole market for citizenship out there. And then apparently it starts at around $100,000.
I had heard it's interesting, and I could see how this could play a role as people look to move, maybe towards more tax-friendly countries. And so having citizenship there would be very, very interesting. That being said, there's some pretty interesting adoption of crypto just right here in Canada, where one of our largest restaurant chains, Tahini, announced that they're going to be purchasing cryptocurrency for their corporate. They bought a bunch of Bitcoin at an average price of $47,000 Canadian, and they've made some pretty kind of funny statements on their Twitter, and basically said, if you don't believe us or don't understand, we don't have time to try to convince you. I'm sorry, was what the lead social media employees added, referring to the legendary phrase of Satoshi Nakamoto. So Canada's also getting on the Bitcoin train.
I'd love to see this kind of adoption. And the other, I mean, they literally said, we bought a ton of BTC, like a poopy ton. And just to throw that there, I mean, it's pretty bossy.
Yeah.
And it's nice. I mean, we've always speculated that one of the signs of adoption was we'll see more and more of this on core balance sheets, kind of following in MicroStrategy. And with all the success they've had recently with this current run-up, and they difference MicroStrategy as well. It's like if you need an explanation, just listen to Michael Saylor. He explains why we're doing it, basically. I thought... So I think this is kind of like a floodgate that will eventually open up for Bitcoin, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think the floodgates are definitely there.
When we first reported on this, there were 25 companies only. It was a handful. And it was like the originals, right? Like I think like Tesla. And then it was like Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin related companies. They're the only ones that hold this. Like they have to hold it. I mean, so yeah, looking forward to seeing how this in kind of a big...
The game theory is definitely starting to play out as Bitcoin price continues to be volatile and grow in generally the right direction. That said, Bitcoin dev Luke has called inscriptions spam, and that's led to some pretty strong pushback from community members. He's a developer and the co-founder of the Ocean Mining Pool, and he says that it's just exploiting a vulnerability in Bitcoin Core to spam the blockchain. There is, however, a lot of community members that are disagreeing and saying that they shouldn't stop and wouldn't, even despite the ongoing debate about network congestion issues.
Yeah, apparently he has a fix for it, but it doesn't mean that the rest of the Bitcoin network is going to go along with it. So he has come up with a fix that could eliminate it, but I don't think there's the momentum to take it. As long as there's a supply and demand for it, it'd be interesting to see how this plays out, but I can't imagine it going away. In fact, inscriptions are becoming more popular, and we're seeing them on other networks like Ethereum, Solana, Polygon, Phantom.
Yeah, they're definitely becoming a thing.
And if miners can make money putting...
well,
it's going to be hard to get rid of it.
It's definitely hard to get rid of it, and I think once you let something like that, unless enough people say that it's a negative impact, I just don't think it's going to happen.
And it seems to be debatable, not like there's this general consensus for or against. So if the market forces are, money can be made doing it, and it's not destroying it. It's making it more expensive, but it's not. It doesn't seem to be completely bringing them.
That's it. So I think there's definitely gonna let it go along, and I understand. So we'll need to keep an eye on that, and we're seeing some news with Robinhood. Robinhood, I think a sign really that this market is moving forward. They're expanding their crypto trading to the more regulated EU space. So they last Thursday launched it for customers in the EU, and they're using it because there's greater regulatory and given the intense kind of scrutiny going on in the US, they wanted to expand their business. They're allowing to trade in about more than 25 cryptocurrencies, including ETH, free of commissions, and this is following the unveiling of the rules in the some pretty big, especially given the fact that the SEC has cracked down on firms like Coinbase and Binance.
Big firms. I'm surprised there's not a lawsuit against Robinhood. It's surprising to hear there's not one, honestly. It seems like they're cracking down on everybody over here.
Yeah, so they are very much cracking down on a lot of people, but this...
Well, hopefully regulation does come for the United States, positive regulation. I know there was a breaking story this morning. Elizabeth Warren introduced a quote-unquote Digital Assets Anti-Money Laundering Act. So this comes on the heels. I have not looked into it too much. There's not too much written about it yet.
I've gotten a little bit while we were long. From a few. Basically, it's aimed at eliminating wallets, and they want to use like basically every wallet to be KYC'd to every validator, so that validators can therefore block excluded and sanctioned addresses. And so that's kind of the entire goal, but there's no way for any blockchain validator to know for sure that any address is blocked. They don't know that these entities necessarily even have a customer to know. Like, you might not necessarily, you might be interacting with a business, you might be interacting with a group of individuals, or it could be a bot that's conducting transactions. Yeah.
Well, she keeps trying, and she seems to want to be at the forefront of regulation. But this is just a proposed law. This is not the law of the land. How Congress reacts to it and how the Senate reacts to it. And we have a presidential election coming up. We'll see how the candidates react to it. But this comes on the heels of Elizabeth listening to how did I write it? Elizabeth Warren swooned and continued to get more comfortable in bed with the leaders of the industry she is supposed to be conducting oversight on the banking committee. So she sits on the banking committee. She had JPMorgan CEO in there, and he said he is deeply opposed to crypto and Bitcoin, saying that the only true use case for the technology is for criminals, drug traffickers, and other bad actors. He said that if he was the U.S. government, he would close it down, which shows a bit of a lack of understanding about it, just the fact that you can't really, on this whole point of it.
Well, the thing is JPMorgan actually conducts transactions on the blockchain on a daily basis. So
they have like their own token even.
They've got their own private blockchain where they conduct transactions. So they are
like the height of hypocrisy. And to go in this a little further, since 2000, JP Morgan has been fined $39 billion for many different transactions. One of them including like a huge cocaine bust on their, and that's just many. And there was Mike Novogratz, he oversees, which oversees $4.6 billion. He pointed out that Bitcoin has outperformed JP Morgan stock in virtually every time frame. And he has this quote: "What surprises me is that so many of Jamie's JP Morgan CEO's clients, wealthiest guys in America, A.B. Johnson of Fidelity, Jeff Yost, Stanley Druckenmiller, Dalio, big investors all believe that Bitcoin is a store of value, and that basically the debate is over. And what is this guy like? What is he talking about?"
Yeah, it's super. It's very much their business is threatened and this is why I think Warren introduced the bill. She's looking to impose the Bank Secrecy Act on non-custodial, and she's essentially trying to keep customers' money in the banks because otherwise her biggest donor to her campaign, JP Morgan, will not be able to make money off other people's and because people will be able to self-custody and just hold digital dollars, USDC, or other currencies, and they won't need the bank. They won't need JP Morgan, and JP Morgan is not yet ready with all of their blockchain technology to say, hey, we'll be your digital bank. And he needs to poo-poo on it as much as possible, and he needs Elizabeth Warren to do.
There's this group called the Cook Report, but they look at different races and whether or not it's possible that the seat flips or that. And I was looking at Elizabeth Warren's seat because I was curious, is there any way she gets defeated? It doesn't look like it, unfortunately, but unless she continues, I don't know. It's just, this isn't popular enough. It's the network, the adoption isn't yet. The knowledge about it isn't there yet where this destroys her. There's probably enough people who have heard the stories about Do Kwon and CZ and Sam Bankman-Fried especially, or that want to see, they're a little scared of Bitcoin and a change. But yeah, I don't know. She is quickly becoming one of my least favorite politicians in the United States.
Yeah, I think she's probably least favorite. Maybe at some, but I don't know if I've even considered him a politician more than a laughingstock. But that being said, we should touch the macro because macro will be pretty influential this week. We've got CPI coming out the morning that we release this video. That's pretty important after a 0% reading last month. We're expecting another 0% reading this month, but we're expecting core CPI to tick up 0.3 down, from 0.2 last month, and CPI year over year to go to around between 3 and 4% on core, and if you're looking at core or not. We've also on the Wednesday we've got.
But it seems like basically not much movement in CPI.
That's essentially what they're expecting. They're expecting it down to the basically a flat reading for regular CPI.
So anything off expectations, either above or below, could really affect the markets.
Yeah, I mean, I think anything below 0 would be a massive for the market, especially the fact that the Fed is literally making their decision the next day, or they're meeting at the same time, and
Right.
announcing their decision. And then core CPI is still ticking up. It's still at 0.3. That is something interesting to watch. I would be intrigued to see if it does read high on CPI, then I think it could. I don't know. I don't think ticking up would be as impactful as. I just think that a slight tick up would not be as big of a danger. I think people are almost expecting it to cap, given the comments about inflation.
So looking at the Fed tool moving forward, I mean, it looks like we've reached a terminal rate and we're just going to pause until we go down.
That's what me is suggesting. We're almost 98% of forecasters expecting a flat has been reached, with only 1% expecting a potential rise, and that holds with a slight expectation of a cut in January, but it's 4% and not really significant. It's March is we start to see that change. A lot of people are still expecting the terminal rate to stay steady, but 41% expecting a cut by March. So
there's very little sentiment for another increase at this point, and it's been kind of holding like that for a few weeks.
Yeah, a month ago there was a 20% expectation in March that the rates would be higher than it is. Now we're talking at percent. So
seems like out the window. Yeah,
it's definitely really changed month. Very, very interesting.
well, the altcoins and the kind of some of the smaller cap, or at least below Bitcoin, have been making a lot of one that I forget about, but it always kind of pops up in the news once in a while, is Litecoin. They're now being used for Microsoft payments. So this was through a partner, right.
And they can now use BTC to top up their Microsoft accounts. So
they continue to extend and adopt. It's kind of always gets overshadowed by Bitcoin, but Litecoin just continues to be there. One of the few proof of work out there. We reported last week they had a big convention on the 7th. They did some movement in their price, but it's kind of settled back down big. But they also will be demoing their next gen ZK product on December 14th, and on December 20th, they're planning to announce some products that will improve their real world asset and institutional adoption. So always keeping an eye on MATIC is one of the few that hasn't too much, seems like.
And then Frax shares, it will be having their halving on December 20th, with the Frax chain coming with Frax AM, a new DeFi primitive being launched soon as well. So
yeah,
a lot of things.
They have a unique stable compared to the others. I'm not going to even attempt to try to explain it because it's a little bit beyond me. But one thing I do understand about it, it's really unique compared to the other types of stable coins, and they are just continuing to develop. We have Synthetix, so SNX, their token, their inflation will be turned off on December. So, and they also have a version 3 launching on Coinbase Layer 2. So they have some potentially big news coming up this month that they've already been pumping a little bit, but may continue their rise if things stay steady in the market.
Definitely. So lots of interesting price action and lots of interesting things going on with alts, and with the whole market airdropping. Airdrop hunting is going quite crazy right now, and I think will continue to be a huge play and a huge part of it. So we hope to be the big part of the rest of your bull market. Please consider liking and subscribing to catch us as soon as we drop. We thank you for your support, and please stay tuned for our next episode. We are not financial advisors, and this is not advice. Thank you for tuning